The evening began with applause. Not loud applause, not joyful applause. The polite kind, smooth and delicate, the sort of applause noble families gave when they wished to admire something without seeming too impressed by it. Miss Seraphina Vale stood in the centre of the blue drawing room at Ravenscar House, one hand still resting on the lid of the music box she had just repaired, while a dozen finely dressed guests looked at her as if she had performed a small miracle and committed a small crime at the same time. The music box had belonged to the late Duchess of Aldwych. For nearly 8 years, it had sat silent on a marble side table, admired as a memory, useless as an object. Earlier that afternoon, while the ladies were pretending not to discuss her father's debts, and the gentlemen were pretending not to know them, Seraphina had noticed the loose hinge, the crooked pin, the trapped spring beneath the goldwork. So she had asked for a hairpin. Lady Beatrice Harrow had laughed. The Dowager Duchess had raised one eyebrow. Lord Adrian Ravenscar had smiled, as though Seraphina had invented charm for his private entertainment. And the Duke of Aldwych had looked up from the far side of the room. That was all. He had looked up. Now the music box sang. A soft, trembling tune filled the drawing room, old, sweet, and unexpectedly sad. The sort of melody that made old women remember being young, and young women remember that beauty always had a price. The applause followed. Seraphina stepped back. "How clever," Lady Beatrice said. She said clever the way some people said improper. Seraphina smiled. "My father says most broken things are only waiting for someone patient enough to find where the pressure begins. Your father is in trade, is he not?" Lady Beatrice asked. There it was. Not a knife, a needle, small enough to deny, sharp enough to draw blood. Seraphina had heard worse. In London, a woman once asked whether her family counted money at breakfast before or after prayers. Another had wondered aloud whether merchants taught their daughters arithmetic because beauty was uncertain. Compared to those, Lady Beatrice's little question was almost lazy. "Yes," Seraphina said, "very successfully." The blue drawing room became still. A few eyes moved toward the Dowager Duchess. A few more moved toward Lord Adrian. Only one pair of eyes remained on Seraphina. The Duke's. Damien Ravenscar, Duke of Aldwych, stood by the mantel with a glass he had not tasted. He was dressed in black, as usual, severe as a sealed letter and twice as unreadable. In the 9 days Seraphina had spent under his roof, she had heard him speak fewer words than his brother used before breakfast. The county called him cold. The servants called him exacting. His mother called him difficult when she thought no one important could hear. Adrian called him the family monument, and everyone laughed because Adrian made mockery feel harmless. But Seraphina had begun to suspect that the Duke was not cold. He was watchful. And there was a difference. Lord Adrian crossed the room then, rescuing the silence with the ease of a man born knowing exactly when people wish to be rescued. "My dear Miss Vale," he said, taking the repaired music box from the table and bowing as though she had conquered an empire, "you have restored the dead to song. If that is what trade teaches, then England owes trade an apology." The room laughed. Of course it did. Adrian made people laugh, even when they had not intended to forgive him. He was beautiful in the careless way of younger sons who had inherited enough rank to be admired and not enough responsibility to be feared. His hair caught candlelight. His smile promised pleasure. His eyes made each person feel, for one dangerous second, chosen. Seraphina allowed him to kiss her gloved fingers. She also noticed the ink stain near his cuff. Fresh, dark blue. Not from the writing desk in the drawing room. That ink was black. "My lord," she said quietly, "you have been writing." Adrian's smile did not move, but something behind it did. "For you, perhaps. Then I look forward to being deceived in beautiful language." He laughed. The room laughed with him. But the Duke did not. At the far end of the drawing room, near the portrait of his late father, Damien Ravenscar set his untouched glass on the mantel. The sound was small. Still, Seraphina heard it. So did Adrian. For a moment, the two brothers looked at each other. No one else seemed to notice the shape of that silence. Or if they did, they mistook it for ordinary family tension, the kind old houses collected like dust. Then the Dowager Duchess rose. "Since Miss Vale has returned music to this room," she said, smiling with graceful command, "perhaps we should return another tradition as well." A footman appeared at once, as if summoned by magic. He carried a long velvet case. The room changed, not visibly perhaps, not enough for anyone to call it alarm, but the air sharpened, fans paused, backs straightened. Lady Beatrice's eyes brightened with interest, so quick it was nearly hunger. Serafina looked at the case. She had never seen it before, but she knew what was inside before the footman opened it. The Ravenscar circlet. Some called it a crown, though it was not one. It was a narrow band of silver and diamonds, once worn by the first Duchess of Aldwych when the family entertained a king during the winter of 1712. It was famous in 3 counties, less for its jewels than for its meaning. A woman shown the circlet before guests was not merely admired. She was being considered. A woman permitted to wear it was nearly chosen. The footman opened the case. Candlelight struck the diamonds. Lady Beatrice went very still. The Dowager Duchess looked at Serafina with affectionate calculation. "This house has always believed," she said, "that a future Ravenscar bride should understand the weight of what she may one day wear." Serafina did not reach for the circlet. Her family needed this. That was the first truth. Her father's investments had failed loudly enough for society to enjoy repeating the details. Her mother had begun selling jewels quietly. Her younger brother's future depended upon money that no longer existed. Lord Adrian Ravenscar had been introduced as salvation with a smile. That was the second truth. He had been kind to her, or he had performed kindness very well. That was the third truth. Serafina was not in love with him. But desperate families could not always afford to ask love what it wanted. Adrian leaned closer to her. "Do not look so solemn," he whispered. "It is only a little crown. Nothing is only anything in this house." His eyes sparkled. "Then allow me to give it a better meaning." Before she could answer, he lifted the circlet from the velvet case. A soft sound passed through the room. The Dowager did not stop him. Lady Beatrice's face tightened. Adrian turned towards Serafina, holding the diamonds in both hands as if offering a fairy tale ending. "One day," he said, low enough to sound intimate, loud enough to be heard, "I shall place this where it belongs." A woman near the windows sighed. Someone whispered, "How romantic." Serafina looked at the circlet, then at Adrian. "What makes you so certain it belongs to me?" His smile deepened. "Because I have decided it does." There it was, the beautiful danger of him. He did not say because you are worthy. He did not say because I know you. He did not say because I love you. He said he had decided, and somehow the whole room found it charming. Serafina's fingers tightened around the edge of her glove. Then the Duke spoke. No. One word. Not shouted. Not angry, but the word landed in the room like a key turning in a locked door. Adrian's smile froze. The Dowager Duchess looked at her elder son with a warning in her eyes. The Duke stepped away from the mantel. "The circlet is not a toy," he said. Adrian laughed lightly. "Dear brother, must you make even romance sound like estate law?" "Yes," the Duke said. The laughter died. Serafina looked at him then. She should not have, but she did. His face revealed almost nothing. His posture was still. His voice had no heat in it. Yet there was something beneath his restraint that made the jewels in Adrian's hands suddenly look less like a promise and more like evidence. Adrian's fingers closed around the circlet. "My brother forgets," he said to the room, "that some traditions are meant to delight, not frighten." "I forget very little," the Duke replied. That was when Serafina saw it. Not in the Duke's face, in Adrian's hand. For one instant, as he lowered the circlet back into the case, the candlelight revealed a small folded paper tucked beneath the velvet lining. It had been hidden under the diamonds. Not fallen there, hidden. Adrian saw her see it. His hand moved too quickly. He closed the case. The click sounded final. No one else noticed. No one except the Duke. His gaze shifted from the case to Serafina's face, and Serafina understood with a sudden cold clarity that the circlet was not the most dangerous thing in the room. The paper was. Dinner was announced before anyone could speak again. The guests moved toward the dining room, in carefully arranged pairs, carrying their smiles with them like candles through a draught. Adrian offered Serafina his arm. She took it because refusing would have made a scene, and scenes belong to people powerful enough to survive them. "You are quiet," he said as they entered the corridor. "I am thinking." A dangerous habit, Yes, she said. Men keep telling me so. He laughed, but not fully. You must not mind Damien. He has been old since he was 12. And you? I intend never to become old at all. That must require great effort. My dear Miss Vale, effort is for people without charm. The line was perfect. Too perfect. Serafina looked at him. Where were you before you came to the drawing room? His fingers tightened very slightly over hers. At the stables. With blue ink on your cuff. This time, he did stop. Only for half a second. Then he smiled down at her, as though she had delighted him. Miss Vale, are you accusing me of secrecy? No. Good. I am accusing you of carelessness. His smile thinned. Then the dining room doors opened, and he became golden again. The dinner table glittered with silver, candles, crystal, and judgment. Serafina was placed between Adrian and Sir Lionel Greaves, a man whose waistcoat was expensive, and whose opinions arrived before his thoughts. Lady Beatrice sat across from them, looking injured in a gown that had clearly cost enough to console her. The Duke sat at the far end, silent, watching. The first course passed with safe conversation. Weather, horses, a new singer in London, the roads after rain. Adrian entertained everyone with a story about a viscount who mistook a bishop for a bailiff. The room loved him for it. Serafina smiled when expected, answered when addressed, listened when ignored. That was how she heard the first crack. Sir Lionel leaned toward her after the fish course. I hear your father is a man of remarkable imagination, he said. My father is a man of remarkable discipline. Ah, discipline. Is that what they call speculation in the city now? Lady Beatrice lowered her eyes to hide her smile. Serafina reached for her glass. She could answer. She knew 17 ways to answer. Sharp answers, elegant answers, answers that would cut him cleanly and leave no blood on the cloth. But her mother's face rose in her mind. Her brother's letters, her father sitting too long over accounts he pretended were routine. So she swallowed the truth. Before she could replace it with politeness, the Duke's voice came from the end of the table. Sir Lionel. The room stopped. Sir Lionel turned, still smiling. Your Grace? You will apologize to Miss Vale. The silence became physical. Sir Lionel blinked. My lord, I meant no offence. Then it should cost you very little to apologize. Adrian's expression darkened. The Dowager Duchess lifted her wineglass slowly, watching both sons over its rim. Sir Lionel's face reddened. He looked at Serafina, and for the first time that evening, he looked smaller than his clothes. Miss Vale, he said stiffly, I apologize. Serafina inclined her head. Accepted. The Duke said nothing else. He did not look triumphant. He did not even look pleased. He simply returned his attention to his plate, as if correcting cruelty was no more dramatic than correcting a misplaced fork. Serafina felt something dangerous move inside her. Gratitude was too small a word. Relief was not precise enough. It was the strange shock of discovering that someone had seen the insult, understood its shape, and refused to let her pay the price for everyone else's comfort. Adrian leaned toward her. My brother enjoys discipline too much. Serafina did not look at him. Perhaps he enjoys accuracy. Adrian's smile returned, but it no longer reached his eyes. After dinner, the gentleman did not linger long over port. The Dowager wanted music again, perhaps to prove the evening had not cracked. Guests gathered in the drawing room, and Adrian sang a light Italian piece, badly enough to be funny and well enough to be admired. Everyone forgave him everything while he sang. Serafina stood near the window. The rain had stopped. Beyond the glass, the gardens glistened under moonlight. She could see the faint outline of the west terrace, the trimmed hedges, the stone steps leading down toward the old orangery. Then she saw movement, a woman crossing the garden. Not a servant. The cloak was too fine. The figure paused beneath the terrace lamp. For one brief second, the hood shifted. Serafina saw pale hair. Then the woman disappeared toward the side gate. A moment later, Adrian stopped singing. Not abruptly, not enough to draw attention. He simply ended the song early, accepted praise, laughed, bowed, and moved toward the door. Serafina watched him go. So did the Duke. That decided her. She waited until the room turned its attention to Lady Beatrice at the pianoforte. then slipped into the corridor. The house beyond the drawing room was dim and quiet. Serafina moved past portraits and closed doors, following the faint sound of footsteps ahead. She reached the turn near the west gallery, just in time to see Adrian at the end of the passage. He was speaking to someone in shadow. A woman's voice whispered, urgent and low. "You promised before Sunday." Adrian answered too softly for Serafina to hear. Then the woman said something that made Serafina's breath stop. "She has no idea what the crown is hiding, does she?" Adrian turned sharply. Serafina stepped back behind the wall. Her heart struck once, hard. Silence. Then Adrian's voice, no longer charming. "Leave before my brother sees you." The side door opened, closed. A moment later, Adrian walked back toward the drawing room, smooth and smiling again, as if he had not left one life in the shadows and returned to another in candlelight. Serafina remained where she was until he passed. Then she stepped into the corridor. "Miss Vale." She turned. The Duke stood near the entrance to the West Gallery. He had not just arrived. That was clear. He had heard enough. Perhaps all of it. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The house seemed to listen with them. Finally, Serafina said, "Who was she?" The Duke did not answer quickly. That frightened her more than any answer could have. "She is the reason," he said at last. "My brother needs you to accept his promise before Sunday." Serafina's throat tightened. "And the crown?" His gaze moved past her toward the gallery, where the velvet case had likely been returned beneath glass. "The crown is not hiding something," he said. "Someone hid something inside it. The paper." He looked at her then. "You saw it?" "Yes." "Did Adrian know?" "Yes." The Duke's jaw shifted slightly. It was the closest thing to anger she had seen in him. Serafina folded her hands together to steady them. "My lord promised me a crown tonight," she said. "He promises many things. And you?" The Duke's eyes held hers. "I promised myself I would not interfere unless you asked. I am asking now." The words came before she could soften them, before she could consider what they might cost. Before she could remember that women in her position were supposed to accept rescue from charming men, not truth from silent ones. The Duke stepped closer, stopping at a careful distance. "If I tell you the truth," he said, "you cannot unknow it." "I am not a child." "No," he said quietly. "That is why I am willing to tell you." Something in her chest tightened. No flattery, no crown, no performance. Only the terrifying respect of being treated like someone strong enough to hear what might ruin her. "What is inside the paper?" she asked. The Duke looked toward the closed drawing room doors, where music and laughter still floated through the house. Then he looked back at her. "A name," he said. "A debt, and a marriage that may already have happened." Serafina went cold. For 1 second, she could not hear the music, could not feel the floor beneath her, could not remember how to breathe without showing the room she had been struck. The Duke's voice remained low. "Meet me tomorrow before breakfast in the West Archive. Bring no maid, tell no one, and Miss Vale." She forced herself to look at him. "Do not accept anything from my brother tonight. Not a flower, not a letter, not a promise." From the drawing room, Adrian's laughter rang out again. Bright, beautiful, beloved by everyone, and false enough now to sound like danger. Serafina looked down the corridor toward the light, then back at the silent Duke standing in shadow. Lord Adrian had promised her a crown. But the Duke had promised her the truth. And for the first time, Serafina wondered whether the truth might destroy her family faster than disgrace ever could. Before we continue, please subscribe to Nightfall Tales. Your support encourages us to keep creating quality stories filled with suspense, emotion, and unforgettable endings. The West Archive smelled of dust, rain, and locked secrets. Serafina reached it before the breakfast bell, with no maid behind her and no candle in her hand. The corridor outside was still blue with early morning, the kind of hour when great houses looked less like homes and more like sleeping courts, full of doors that had heard too much. For one moment, she stood outside the archive and considered leaving, not because she feared the Duke. She feared what he might prove. There were still softer explanations available if she wanted them badly enough. Lord Adrian might have been careless, not cruel. The woman in the garden might have been a cousin, a servant, a debtor, a nuisance. The hidden paper might have been an old family letter, nothing more. The Duke might have misunderstood everything, because silent men sometimes mistook suspicion for wisdom. But Serafina had lived too long among polite lies to mistake them for peace. She opened the door. The Duke was already inside. He stood at a long table beneath the high, narrow window, with the velvet case open before him and the Ravenscar circlet resting beside it like a beautiful accomplice. Morning light touched the diamonds and made them look innocent. They were not. Damien Ravenscar did not greet her with surprise. "You came. I said I was asking." "Yes." That was not the same as obedience. "No," he said. "It was courage." She did not answer that. Compliments from Lord Adrian were like ribbons tossed from a balcony, easy to catch, easier to forget. But from the Duke, one plain sentence carried weight. She looked at the case. "Show me." He reached beneath the velvet lining and withdrew the folded paper. It was smaller than she expected. That made it worse. Important ruins did not always arrive in dramatic form. Sometimes they came folded into a space under diamonds, waiting for a careless hand to reveal them. The Duke placed it before her. Serafina unfolded it. There were 3 lines. A woman's name, a sum of money, and beneath them, a signature she knew so well that the room seemed to tilt. Elias Vale. Her father. For several seconds, Serafina could not speak. The ink was blue, fresh enough, dark enough. The same shade she had seen near Adrian's cuff the previous night. She gripped the edge of the table. "That is not my father's hand. I know." "You know?" "Yes." "How?" "Because I have 4 of your father's letters in my study. He writes with a rightward pressure on the final stroke. This signature imitates the shape, not the force." She looked up at him. "You studied my father's letters." "I study documents that enter my house under false pretenses." "Do not make this sound like estate work, Your Grace. That is my father's name." "I know." "Then tell me why it is hidden beneath a family circlet." The Duke held her gaze. "Because my brother intended for it to be found only after you accepted him publicly." The words were so calm that, for a moment, she hated him for them. Not because he was wrong, because calm made the truth sound survivable before the heart had agreed. Serafina looked back at the paper. Beside her father's false signature was the amount, £12,000. A ruinous sum, not for a duke perhaps, but for a family already bleeding reputation and credit, it was enough to finish what rumour had begun. "What is this?" she asked. "A forged acknowledgement of debt. To whom?" "Lord Malvern." She knew the name. Everyone knew the name. Lord Malvern smiled in public, lent money in private, and destroyed families with the patience of a spider. Her father had once called him a gentleman with the morals of damp rot. "My father would never borrow from him." "No. And yet someone wants the world to believe he did." "Yes." She turned the paper over. There was another mark on the back, a single initial. A. Adrian. Serafina's mouth went dry. The Duke saw her see it. He said nothing. That silence was not empty. It gave her room to arrive at the truth without being dragged there. "Why me?" she whispered. The Duke's expression did not change, but his voice lowered. "Because your father's name is wounded, not dead. A scandal would finish him. A marriage into my family would protect him. That is what Adrian wanted you to believe." "And in exchange? Your father would be forced to honor a false debt to avoid public disgrace." Serafina folded the paper carefully, though her fingers felt cold. "And my family would be saved by the same man robbing us." The Duke's jaw tightened. "Yes." A laugh escaped her. Not amusement. A hard, brittle thing. How elegant. Adrian has always preferred elegant sins. She looked at him sharply. There was something in the way he said it. Not surprise. Not recent discovery. History. "How long have you known what he is?" The Duke did not answer at once. That frightened her. "Longer than I can defend," he said. The honest answer hurt more than an excuse would have. Serafina stepped back from the table. "You let him court me." "No, you permitted it." "My mother arranged it while I was in London settling the northern leases. You returned and said nothing. I told her the match was dangerous. To your mother, not to me." "No. Why?" The question struck harder than she intended. It filled the archive and remained there. The Duke looked down at the circlet, at the paper, at the proof that had arrived too late to make him innocent. "Because I did not yet have evidence," he said. "And a man with my reputation accusing a charming younger brother without evidence is not believed. He is only resented." Serafina understood that. She hated that she understood it. The world loved charm, because charm made no demands of conscience. Truth required people to change where they stood. "And now you have evidence," she said. "Some." "Some? The forged note is one piece. The woman in the garden is another. Who is she?" This time, he looked toward the door. "Her name is Maribel Shaw." Serafina waited. The name meant nothing. "She was companion to Lady Beatrice Harrow until 6 months ago," he continued. "Before that, she was promised protection by my brother." "Protection? A house, an allowance, a future." Serafina's face hardened. "Those are not vows." "No, but she believed they were." "Yes. And the marriage?" His eyes returned to hers. "There is a record in a private chapel near Bath. It bears Adrian's name." Serafina felt the floor disappear and return beneath her. "Then he is married." "Perhaps." "What does perhaps mean?" "It means the register may be false, the witness may have been paid, the priest may not exist, and Adrian may have promised just enough to trap her without binding himself." The cruelty of it opened slowly. Not one betrayal. A design. A man could be careless once. He could be weak once. He could even be selfish and still leave a path back to decency. But this required planning. A false debt. A hidden paper. A desperate woman. A public promise. A crown used as bait. Serafina looked at the diamonds on the table and suddenly wanted to throw them into the fire. Instead, she asked, "Why before Sunday?" "Because Lord Malvern arrives Sunday evening." The room tightened around her. "If Adrian is publicly attached to you before then," the Duke said, "Malvern can pressure your father quietly. No scandal. No court, no open accusation, merely the suggestion that refusing payment would bring shame on both families. And if I refuse Adrian before Sunday, then Malvern exposes the false debt and claims your father denied it only because he failed to secure protection here." Serafina closed her eyes. There it was, the trap. Accept Adrian, and her family would be robbed slowly under the mask of rescue. Reject Adrian, and her family could be ruined publicly before they could prove the signature false. Either way, Lord Adrian remained charming. Either way, society would blame her father for standing too close to disgrace. When she opened her eyes, the Duke was watching her. Not with pity. That mattered. If he had pitied her, she might have broken. "What do you suggest?" she asked. "Nothing." She blinked. "Nothing? I will not decide your future while pretending it is protection. What a noble restraint." "It is not noble, it is necessary." Her anger rose then, quick and hot. "You wake me before breakfast, show me my father's forged name, tell me your brother may already have a wife, explain that my family is standing in a trap, and now you offer nothing?" The Duke accepted the blow without flinching. "I offer the truth. What you do with it must be yours. And if I choose wrongly, then at least no one will have chosen for you." That silenced her. Because beneath the anger, beneath the fear, beneath the awful pressure of her father's name on that paper, she heard the respect in it. He was not washing his hands of her. He was refusing to purchase her obedience with rescue. Lord Adrian had offered a crown and expected gratitude. The Duke offered truth and expected strength. She was not sure which was heavier. The archive door opened suddenly. Serafina turned. A maid stood there, pale and breathless. "Forgive me, Your Grace. Miss Vale. Her Grace asks for Miss Vale in the breakfast room." The Duke folded the forged note before the maid could see it. Serafina understood at once. The house had awakened. And somewhere inside it, someone had noticed she was not where she was supposed to be. "Tell her Grace I am coming," Serafina said. The maid curtsied and vanished. The Duke returned the paper to Serafina. She stared at it. "You are giving me this? It has your father's name on it. And if Adrian knows I have it, he will try to charm you first. And after that?" The Duke's eyes darkened. "He will become honest by accident." Serafina slipped the paper inside her sleeve. Then she walked to the door. At the threshold, she stopped. Your Grace. Yes? If you have known him longer than I have, tell me one thing plainly. He waited. Does Adrian love anyone? The Duke's answer came quietly. Yes. Hope moved before she could stop it. Then he finished. Himself. Breakfast was a theatre performance staged around toast. The Dowager Duchess sat at the head of the table, serene and immaculate, pouring tea as if no secret in the house had stirred before dawn. Lord Adrian arrived last, smiling, fresh and perfectly dressed, with no blue ink on his cuff. He had changed his coat. Serafina noticed. The Duke noticed her noticing. Lady Beatrice watched all of them with the look of a woman who had not been told the whole play, but knew she had a role in it. Adrian took the seat beside Serafina. You abandoned us early last night, he said. I was tired. Of the music? Of performance. His smile paused, then returned. Then, today I must be sincere. How ambitious. He laughed softly and reached for her hand beneath the table. She moved her hand to lift her teacup before he touched her. His eyes sharpened. Only for a second. Have I offended you? Should you have? My dear Serafina, if I knew how to avoid offending women, I would be the most beloved man in England. You are already trying very hard. The Duke lowered his eyes to his plate. It might have been nothing, but Serafina thought he was hiding something dangerously close to amusement. The Dowager Duchess interrupted before Adrian could answer. Miss Vale, I thought we might drive to the old chapel today. It is a family favourite. Adrian has always loved it. Lady Beatrice's spoon struck her saucer. The sound was tiny, but Serafina heard it. The old chapel. A chapel near the house, or another chapel meant to misdirect her from the one near Bath. Adrian leaned back. A charming idea, Mother, though perhaps Miss Vale would prefer the gardens. I would like to see the chapel, Serafina said. Adrian looked at her. The Dowager smiled. The Duke said nothing. So it was decided. By noon, the sky had cleared, leaving the gardens bright and wet, every leaf shining as though the storm had polished the estate for inspection. The old chapel stood beyond the yew walk, half covered in ivy, with a small bell tower and stained glass dulled by age. It looked peaceful. That made Serafina distrust it immediately. The Dowager walked ahead with Lady Beatrice. Adrian stayed beside Serafina, attentive again, charming again, speaking of childhood mischief, stolen apples, and a summer when he and Damien had hidden in the bell tower to avoid a tutor. Did the Duke hide with you willingly? Serafina asked. Damien never did anything willingly, except judge people. And yet he followed you. Adrian smiled. He has always followed me more than he admits. Serafina looked at him. No, she said softly. I think he has always watched where you were going. Adrian's smile cooled. Inside the chapel, the air smelled of stone and old flowers. The Dowager spoke of family weddings, family baptisms, family griefs, carefully arranged into acceptable memory. Serafina listened. Then she saw it. Near the altar, half hidden behind a brass stand, was a woman's glove. Plain grey, damp at the edge, a travelling glove, not belonging to the Dowager, not Lady Beatrice, not Serafina. She stepped toward it. Adrian moved first. So solemn a place, he said, catching her attention with a light touch at her elbow. It makes one consider vows. Serafina looked at his hand, then at his face. Do vows matter to you? He smiled. Only when spoken by the right woman. And if they are spoken by the wrong one? The mask slipped. Not entirely, but enough. You have been listening to my brother. I have been listening to everyone. Dangerous. You said that yesterday, and yet you persist. Yes. His voice lowered. Serafina, whatever Damien has implied, you should understand something. My brother collects faults because he does not know how to inspire affection. He will show you every crack in me and call it truth, because truth is the only gift he knows how to give. And what gift do you know how to give? His gaze moved to the altar, then back to her. Escape. The word was beautiful. Too beautiful. He stepped closer. Marry me, and your father's troubles vanish. Your mother is respected again. Your brother remains at Cambridge. Every woman who has pitied you will have to curtsy when you enter a room. That sounds like a crown. It is. And what does it cost? His smile softened. Only trust. No, she said. Trust is what men ask for when the price is hidden. He stared at her. For the first time since she had met him, Lord Adrian Ravenscar looked truly displeased. Not wounded, not amused, displeased. You should be careful, he said quietly. There it was. The charm had opened, and something colder had looked out. Serafina's pulse slowed. I am being careful. No, Adrian said. You are being influenced. By the truth. By a man who has wanted what is mine since childhood. She almost laughed. Am I yours? He realized the mistake at once. But he could not unsay it. The dowager called from the door. Adrian, Miss Vale, we are returning. He stepped back. The golden smile returned before anyone else could see it missing. Of course, mother. But as Serafina followed the others out of the chapel, she looked once over her shoulder. The grey glove was gone. Someone had taken it. Someone who did not want her to know the woman in the garden had been inside that chapel. That afternoon, Serafina received flowers. White roses. 12 of them. No note. She stared at them on the writing desk in her chamber. Do not accept anything from my brother tonight. Not a flower. Not a letter. Not a promise. The Duke had said tonight. But apparently danger kept no schedule. Serafina called for no maid. She broke the stems herself, one by one. On the 8th rose she found it. A small strip of paper wrapped around the stem beneath the ribbon. Not a love note. A warning. Give him the paper, or your father will answer for all of it. Serafina sat very still. Then she did the one thing a desperate person was not expected to do. She stopped acting alone. She went to the Duke's study. He was at his desk, reading correspondence, when she entered without being announced. His secretary looked horrified. The Duke looked up. Serafina placed the warning on his desk. Then she removed the forged note from her sleeve and placed it beside the warning. I believe, she said, your brother has stopped charming me. The secretary went pale. The Duke read both papers. His expression did not change, but the room did. It became colder. More exact, more dangerous. Where did this come from? The roses. Who delivered them? I do not know. The Duke looked to his secretary. Find out. The man left immediately. Serafina remained standing. What happens now? Now, the Duke said, rising, Adrian realizes you are not as alone as he believed. And then? Then he makes a mistake. He already has. No, the Duke said, he has made sins. A mistake is different. A mistake can be used. Before Serafina could answer, voices rose in the corridor. The door opened. Lord Adrian stepped in. He saw Serafina. He saw the papers. And for one perfect silent second, he forgot to smile. Then he laughed. My God, he said softly. Damien, have you started receiving ladies in your study before dinner? Mother will be devastated. The Duke did not move. Close the door. Adrian did. The click echoed. Serafina stood between the brothers, and at last the room contained no performance, no guests, no music, no crown, no careful dinner conversation, only truth circling the table like a blade. Adrian looked at Serafina. You disappoint me. She lifted her chin. Good. His eyes flashed. Then he turned to the Duke. You should have stayed out of this. I tried. No, Adrian said. You watched. That is worse. The Duke's voice remained even. Is the marriage record real? Serafina's breath caught. Adrian's smile returned slowly. Which one? The question struck the room like broken glass. Which one? Serafina stared at him. The Duke went utterly still. Adrian saw the effect and enjoyed it. There was the truth of him at last. Not the laughter, not the beauty, not the graceful apology. The enjoyment. He liked being underestimated. He liked knowing more than others. He liked watching the moment when charm became power. You see, Adrian said softly to Serafina, my brother gives truth badly. He never knows how much a lady can bear. Serafina stepped closer to the desk. Then tell it better. For a moment, Adrian's expression changed. He had expected fear, maybe tears, maybe pleading. He had not expected invitation. She picked up the forged note. Did you sign my father's name? Adrian looked at the paper, then at her. No. The Duke's eyes narrowed. Serafina heard the answer beneath the answer. No, she said. You did not sign it yourself. Adrian's mouth twitched. You are quicker than I hoped. Who did? Adrian did not answer. The Duke did. Beatrice. Serafina turned. The door behind them opened before anyone could speak. Lady Beatrice Harrow stood in the threshold. Her face was white, but her eyes were furious. Behind her, the Dowager Duchess stood like a queen who had just discovered her throne was built over a cellar of snakes. No one spoke. Then Lady Beatrice lifted her chin and said the one sentence that made every secret in Ravenscar House shift. I signed it because he promised me the crown first. Serafina looked at Adrian, then at the Dowager, then at the Duke, and suddenly the trap was larger than her family, larger than one forged note, larger than one false promise in an orangery. Lord Adrian had not promised one woman a crown. He had promised it to everyone who could be useful. Before we continue to this controversial question, if you were Serafina, would you expose Lord Adrian publicly and risk destroying your father's name along with him, or would you stay silent until you had enough power to ruin him safely? Comment your answer below. For several seconds, no one in the Duke's study moved. Lady Beatrice stood in the doorway with her face pale and her eyes burning, the Dowager Duchess behind her as still as a portrait, and Lord Adrian between them all with the calm of a man who had just been exposed and still believed he could make exposure look like misunderstanding. Serafina looked at the forged note on the desk, then at Beatrice. You signed my father's name? Beatrice's chin trembled, but pride held it high. I did not know it would be used against your father. That is a strange defense for forgery. I was desperate. So am I, Serafina said quietly. Yet my hand did not become someone else's. The words struck cleanly. Beatrice looked away first. Adrian gave a soft laugh. My dear Miss Vale, you have a talent for turning tragedy into judgment. Beatrice made a foolish mistake. She believed what she wished to believe. Most people do. The Duke's voice cut through the room. And what did you make her believe? Adrian turned toward him, smiling again. That I admired her. No. That I intended to marry her. No. Adrian's smile thinned. The Duke stepped around the desk. What did you make her believe about the circlet? Beatrice's hands tightened around her gloves. The Dowager Duchess finally spoke. Adrian. It was not a warning. It was a plea disguised as command. But Adrian did not look at his mother. He looked at Serafina, and that told her everything. He was not frightened of his mother. He was not even frightened of the Duke, but he was beginning to dislike Serafina because she had become the one person in the room he could no longer place. She was supposed to be grateful. She was supposed to be cornered. She was supposed to want saving badly enough to confuse rescue with ownership. Instead, she had listened. And men like Adrian feared listeners. He bowed his head slightly. Very well. Since we are apparently enjoying honesty this morning, Lady Beatrice believed she would be Duchess of Aldwych. The Dowager closed her eyes. Beatrice made a small broken sound. Serafina went still, not because she was surprised that Adrian had lied. That much was already clear. But because of the title. Duchess of Aldwych. Not wife of Lord Adrian. Not mistress of Ravenscar charm. Duchess. She turned to the Duke. Damien Ravenscar looked as if someone had placed a knife between his ribs and asked him to remain polite. Explain, Serafina said. Adrian answered before his brother could. Oh, Damien never explains anything. That is his great gift. Silence so heavy everyone mistakes it for dignity. Enough, the Duke said. No, Adrian said, and for the first time his voice lost its golden surface. Not enough. You want truth. Let us have it. Beatrice believed I could remove my brother from the line of inheritance. The room seemed to shrink. The Dowager whispered, Adrian, stop. But he was past stopping now. That was the danger of charm when it failed. It did not become humility. It became cruelty. Adrian looked at Beatrice. I told her there was a way, a paper, a witness, a scandal old enough to be revived and useful enough to be believed. I told her Damien's claim could be challenged. Beatrice's voice shook. You said it was true. I said many things. You said your brother was not legitimate. The sentence fell into the room like a body. Serafina's breath caught. The Duke did not move, but something in his face altered so slightly that it hurt to see. Not shame, not fear, weariness. As if the lie was not new, only newly spoken in front of the wrong people. The Dowager Duchess stepped forward. That rumor died 20 years ago. Adrian smiled. Rumors never die, Mother. They only wait for someone clever enough to feed them. Serafina understood then. The forged debt was not the whole trap. It was one thread. Beatrice had signed Elias Vale's name because Adrian had promised her a future crown. Maribel Shaw had been hidden because Adrian had promised her protection. Serafina had been courted because Adrian needed a desperate family to bind to his scheme before Lord Malvern arrived. And beneath all of it was something darker, a plan to strike at the Duke himself. Lord Adrian had not merely promised different women the same crown. He had planned to steal the house that gave it meaning. The Duke looked at Beatrice. What did you sign besides the debt note? Beatrice swallowed. Nothing. The Duke waited. Her face crumpled. A statement. The Dowager gripped the back of a chair. What statement? Beatrice could barely speak. That I had heard the late Duke confess uncertainty about your birth. The words were absurd, ugly, almost laughable. And yet Serafina saw at once why they mattered. In society, truth was not always what happened. Truth was what enough respectable people could be made to repeat. A lady's signed statement, a forged financial bond, a desperate merchant's daughter suddenly engaged into the family, a lender arriving with pressure, a hidden woman, a whisper revived at the correct dinner table. It would not need to be legally perfect. It only needed to be socially poisonous. The Duke could survive many things, but a noble house could bleed from rumor before evidence ever reached a court. Serafina turned to Adrian. You were going to ruin your brother. Adrian's eyes flashed. My brother ruined me first. The Duke's voice was quiet. How? By being born before me. No one answered. There was nothing to answer. The nakedness of it was almost embarrassing. All the charm, all the laughter, all the shining promises. And beneath it, a boy who had grown into a man, still furious that another child had entered the world first. The Duke looked at his mother. Leave us. The Dowager did not move. Damien. Not you, he said. Adrian. Adrian laughed softly. You cannot dismiss me like a servant. No, the Duke said. A servant would have shown more honor. The insult landed. Adrian stepped forward. For one dangerous moment, Serafina thought he might strike his brother. Instead, he did what he had always done best. He turned toward the woman most vulnerable to being blamed. Miss Vale, he said gently, you should think very carefully before trusting him. My brother will destroy all of us and call it principle. If this becomes public, your father's name is still on that note. Beatrice may have written it, but who will believe she acted without reason? Who will believe your father innocent when everyone already knows he needs money? Serafina felt the blow because it was designed to hurt. It carried enough truth to be dangerous. Adrian saw it. His voice softened. Marry me, and none of this needs to happen. I will burn the note. I will silence Malvern. Your family will be protected. My brother will keep his title. Beatrice will recover. Maribel will be settled. Everyone survives. The room went still. There it was again. The crown. Not diamonds this time. A bargain. A beautiful prison built out of relief. Serafina looked at the forged note. Then at Beatrice's ruined face. Then at the Dowager, who was staring at her younger son as if seeing the cost of loving charm too long. Finally, she looked at the Duke. Damien did not speak. That was what decided her. Not because he had nothing to say, because he would not rescue her choice from her. Lord Adrian offered silence in exchange for safety. The Duke offered truth and allowed it to cost him. Serafina lifted the forged note from the desk. No? Adrian's expression froze. She turned to Beatrice. You will write a full confession. Beatrice flinched. To what? To forging my father's name. To signing a false statement. To doing both because Lord Adrian promised you the Aldwych circlet and the Duchess's place. Adrian laughed once. She will do no such thing. Beatrice looked at him. There was something new in her face now. Not courage yet, but the beginning of hatred. You told me he was cruel, she whispered. Adrian's smile returned, thin and sharp. He is. No, Beatrice said. He is silent. I mistook it because you taught me to. The Duke looked away, as though her apology, indirect as it was, cost him more than her accusation. The Dowager crossed the room slowly and stood before Beatrice. My dear, she said, and her voice was stripped of all drawing-room polish, write it. Beatrice stared at her. If I do, I am finished. The Dowager's face tightened. If you do not, you will become the sort of woman who finishes others. That was the sentence that broke her. Beatrice sat at the Duke's desk and began to write. Adrian watched her with disbelief first, then anger, then something colder. You foolish girl. The Duke moved before Serafina fully saw him move. He did not touch Adrian. He merely stepped between him and Beatrice. That is the last time you speak to her today. Adrian's eyes narrowed. And if I refuse? The Duke looked at the door. Then I call the footman, and you discover how little charm matters when men are paid to obey me. For once, Adrian had no answer. By afternoon, Ravenscar House was no longer a house. It was a chamber before a trial. Letters were sent quietly. The Duke's secretary rode to fetch the family solicitor. The Dowager locked herself in her sitting room with Beatrice and did not emerge for 2 hours. Lord Adrian was not imprisoned, not openly, but 2 footmen appeared wherever he went, and the servants stopped smiling at him. That, Serafina thought, must have wounded him most. To lose admiration below stairs before losing it above. At 4 o'clock, Serafina's father arrived. Elias Vale entered Ravenscar House with mud on his boots, worry on his face, and the look of a man who had driven too hard because a letter from his daughter had contained only 3 sentences. Papa, come immediately. Trust no message that does not come from my hand. Bring the red ledger. When he saw her in the entrance hall, he took both her hands. What has happened? Everything, Serafina said. But not yet the worst of it. He studied her face. Then, as he had done all her life, he accepted that his daughter would explain in the order necessary. Where? The Duke's study. Elias Vale's eyes sharpened. The Duke? Yes. Not Lord Adrian? No. Her father looked at her for 1 heartbeat longer. Then he nodded. Good. Serafina nearly smiled. In the study, the truth was placed on the table like evidence in a court. The forged note, Beatrice's confession, the false statement about the Duke's birth, the warning from the roses, Maribel Shaw's name, the hidden chapel record, and finally, the red ledger her father had brought from London. It was Elias Vale who revealed the last piece. Lord Malvern has been circling my accounts for months, he said. I would not borrow from him. But someone with knowledge of my temporary losses approached 2 of my creditors and suggested I had already secured noble protection. Adrian, the Duke said. Elias looked at him. Likely, but not alone. Serafina went cold. Not alone. Her father opened the red ledger and pointed to a name. The Duke leaned over the page. His face hardened. Sir Lionel Greaves. Of course. The man at dinner. The insult had not been casual. It had been a test. A way to see whether Serafina would endure public shame quietly. A way to measure how desperate she was. Elias tapped the page once. Greaves owes Malvern almost as much as he owns in land. If Lord Adrian promised him relief in exchange for help pressing me, he would take it. The Duke's secretary entered then, breathless but composed. Your Grace, Lord Malvern has arrived. A silence followed. He was early. Predators often were. The Duke looked at Serafina. This time, he asked, do you wish to be present? Her father turned sharply. No. Serafina squeezed his hand. Yes. Serafina, my name is on nothing, she said, but my future has been handled by everyone in this room as if it were a document passed from one man to another. I will be present. The Duke did not smile, but there was approval in his silence. Lord Malvern entered like a man accustomed to rooms becoming smaller around him. He was not old, not young, not handsome, not ugly. He had the terrible neatness of a man who enjoyed paperwork, because ink could do what swords no longer could in polite society. He bowed to the Duke, then to the Dowager, Then his eyes found Serafina and her father. "Mr. Vale," he said, "what a pleasure." Elias did not bow. "Lord Malvern." Malvern smiled. "I understand there is a private matter requiring settlement." The Duke gestured to the desk. "Several." Malvern's smile cooled when he saw the papers. Not disappeared. Men like him did not surrender expressions easily. But cooled. Adrian stood near the window, pale with anger now, all charm stripped down to bone. Sir Lionel Greaves had been brought in minutes later, protesting confusion until he saw the red ledger and stopped speaking entirely. The Duke began. Not loudly, not dramatically. He laid out the truth piece by piece with such calm precision that no one could interrupt without appearing guilty. A forged note, a false witness statement, a compromised lady, a hidden chapel record, a planned pressure campaign against Elias Vale, a rumour prepared against the Duke's legitimacy, a lender arriving early to collect on a debt that did not exist. Lord Malvern listened. Then he smiled. "I am shocked." "No," Serafina said. Every eye turned to her. She stepped forward. "You are inconvenienced. Shock requires innocence." Her father inhaled sharply. The Duke was very still. Malvern looked at her as if she had become interesting in an unpleasant way. "Young lady, you should be careful making accusations you cannot prove." Serafina reached into her pocket and removed the final thing she had taken from the music box that morning. A thin strip of blue-stained paper. The repaired music box had played because she had fixed the spring. But inside its loose base, beneath years of dust, she had found something else. A torn half-letter. Not enough to understand at first. Not until she saw the warning from the roses. Not until she saw the same blue ink. She placed it on the desk. "My father says most broken things are only waiting for someone patient enough to find where the pressure begins." Malvern stared at the paper. The Duke picked it up and read aloud. "Once the Vale girl accepts, Greaves will press the father, Beatrice will swear to the statement, and the brother will have no choice but to settle quietly." He stopped. The room was silent. The torn letter carried no signature. It did not need one. Lord Malvern's face had already confessed before his mouth could defend him. Adrian looked at Serafina with pure hatred. "You went through the music box?" "I repaired it," she said. "There is a difference." And there, at last, the beautiful machinery of Lord Adrian Ravenscar broke. Not in flame, not in thunder, in silence. Because every person in the room understood that he had hidden a conspiracy inside the object Serafina had restored in front of everyone. He had placed his secret inside the late Duchess's music box and his trap beneath the family circlet. He had used memory as storage. Women as ladders, debts as chains, charm as perfume over rot. The Duke turned to his secretary. "Send for the magistrate." Adrian lunged forward. "You would do that to your own brother?" The Duke looked at him. "No," he said quietly. "You did this to mine." For the first time all day, Adrian had nothing beautiful to say. The aftermath did not arrive neatly. Scandals never do. They spill, they stain, they make even innocent people wash their hands more than once. Lord Malvern denied everything until his own clerk, frightened by the Duke's solicitor, produced copies of correspondence that made denial useless. Sir Lionel Greaves attempted to blame drink, debt, and poor judgment, which were all true and none sufficient. Lady Beatrice left Ravenscar House before nightfall with her aunt, carrying shame, a written confession, and perhaps the first honest thought she had ever had about the cost of wanting a crown. Maribel Shaw was found 2 days later at an inn near Bath. The chapel record was false. The promise made to her had not been. The Dowager Duchess arranged, quietly and without argument, for Maribel to receive a settlement that did not require silence, only peace. It was the first decision Serafina saw her make that felt less like preserving the family and more like repairing a soul. Lord Adrian left under escort. Not to prison at once. Men with rank rarely fell that quickly. But he left stripped of invitation, inheritance favour, family trust, and the one thing he had always spent carelessly because he believed it endless: admiration. By Sunday evening, Ravenscar House was quieter than it had ever been. Serafina found the Duke in the West Gallery. The circlet had been returned to its glass case. The music box sat beside it now, repaired, cleaned, and closed. The Duke stood before both. "You were right," he said. She stopped beside him. "That is a dangerous thing to say to me. I may grow fond of hearing it. You found the pressure point. In the music box. In the house." She looked at the circlet. "It is smaller than it seemed the first night. Most crowns are. And heavier? Always." They stood in silence. But it was not the silence of secrets now. It was the silence after a storm, when broken branches still lay on the ground, but the air could finally be breathed. "My father leaves tomorrow," Serafina said. "I know. He says your solicitor is the first man of law he has met who listens before charging." "That is high praise from Elias Vale." "It is." The Duke looked at her then, directly. "Will you leave with him?" The question was plain. No trap. No pressure. No crown. Serafina looked at the glass case, then at the man beside her. Lord Adrian had promised to raise her above the women who pitied her. The Duke had stood beside her, while the truth made pity irrelevant. "There was a moment," she said, "when I believed marrying into this house would save my family. And now? Now I know houses do not save people. People do, sometimes by telling the truth before it is convenient." He was quiet for a long moment. "I should have told you sooner." "Yes." The answer struck him, but he accepted it. "I had evidence too late and suspicion too early," he said. "I thought silence was restraint." "And was it?" "No." She nodded. "Good." His brows moved slightly. "Good? I prefer a man who can name his own mistake. It saves me the labor of doing it for him." For the first time since she had known him, the Duke almost smiled. Not fully. Not yet. But enough that the stern lines of his face changed, and Serafina saw the man beneath the silence. Not cold. Careful. Not empty. Deep. He turned toward the case and unlocked it. Serafina stiffened. "What are you doing?" He removed the circlet, but he did not lift it toward her head. He placed it in her hands. "The first time it was shown to you, it was used as bait. I would like you to feel its weight without anyone asking you to become smaller beneath it." The diamonds were cold against her gloves. Lighter than she expected. Heavier than she wanted. She looked down at them. "Are you promising me a crown, Your Grace?" "No." "Good. I am promising you the truth." She looked up. "Even when it makes you look badly. Especially then. Even when silence would be easier." "Yes. Even if I do not choose what you want." The Duke's face changed. There was the cost. There was the heart beneath the discipline. "Yes," he said. Serafina closed the circlet case herself. Then she placed the key in his hand. "I do not want a crown used to purchase me. No, and I do not want a man who rescues me so he can own the story afterward. I would not." "I know," she said. "That is why I am still here." He went very still. Outside the gallery windows, evening settled over the gardens. The rain had washed the world clean, or clean enough to begin again. Serafina stepped closer, not into his arms, not into surrender, only close enough that truth no longer had to cross the whole room. "My family will return to London," she said. "My father's name must be restored publicly. Beatrice's confession must be handled without destroying her completely. Maribel must be protected, and your brother's lies must not be allowed to become whispers that survive longer than the facts." "Yes, I will help." His eyes searched hers. "As what?" She looked at the circlet case, then at him. "As myself, for now." The Duke bowed his head once. It was not disappointment, it was respect, and that, more than any vow he might have spoken, almost undid her. 3 months later, the county still talked. Of course it did. The county had survived wars, taxes, bad harvests, and several unfortunate marriages, but it had never survived silence. It needed conversation the way candles needed flame. They talked about Lord Adrian's removal to the continent. They talked about Lord Malvern's disgrace. They talked about Sir Lionel Greaves selling land he had once boasted would remain in his family forever. They talked about Lady Beatrice Harrow, who did not marry that season and was seen less often at balls, though some said she had begun reading in earnest, which society considered nearly as alarming as scandal. They talked about Elias Vale, whose name had not only recovered, but strengthened, because nothing impresses England like a man nearly ruined by fraud, who emerges with cleaner hands than those born above him. And they talked most of all about Miss Seraphina Vale and the Duke of Aldwych. Not because there had been a dramatic proposal. There had not. Not because he had placed the circlet on her head before a room of gasping guests. He had not. But because at every dinner where people expected her to be ashamed, she spoke clearly. And at every moment when someone tried to reduce her to the scandal she had survived, the Duke said one quiet sentence that ended the attempt. Not speeches, not performances, just truth, delivered once. Eventually, the county learned to listen the first time. In June, Seraphina returned to Ravenscar House for a small dinner. No velvet case was brought out. No crown glittered on a cushion. No charming man offered her the world with a hidden chain beneath it. After dinner, she walked to the West Gallery and found the Duke there, beside the repaired music box. It was playing softly. The old tune trembled through the room, no longer sad exactly, only remembered. "You wound it," she said. "I did. Careful. Music may damage your reputation for severity. I am prepared to risk it." She smiled. This time, fully. He turned to her. "I have something to ask you." "I assumed you might." "I have conditions first." That surprised her, then delighted her. "Excellent," she said. "Proceed. If you marry me, you will never be asked to wear the circlet as proof that you belong here." "Good. You will see every account that concerns the estate, the house, or any matter touching your family. Better. You will tell me when I mistake silence for wisdom. Constantly, if necessary. And I will tell you the truth," he said, quieter now. "Not because it is easy for me, but because you deserve nothing less." Seraphina looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "And if I ask for the truth now?" "Ask." "Do you love me, Damien?" His answer came without performance, without charm, without fear. Yes. There was no crown in his hands, no diamonds, no audience. No applause, only the repaired music box, the evening light, and the man who had promised her the one thing no fortune could buy and no scandal could counterfeit, the truth. Seraphina took his hand. "Then yes," she said. "I will marry you." And perhaps that is why this story remains. Not because the charming brother promised a crown. Men have promised crowns to women for centuries, and too often those crowns were only cages, polished brightly enough to look like honor. Not because the silent Duke was perfect. He was not. He had been late with truth, and he knew it. But because Seraphina Vale understood before it was too late that a beautiful promise can still be a trap, and a difficult truth can still be a form of love. Lord Adrian offered her height. The Duke offered her ground. And in a world where women were so often lifted only to be displayed, Seraphina chose the man who allowed her to stand. So when people asked, years later, whether the Duchess of Aldwych had married for love, safety, or ambition, those who knew her best gave the only answer that mattered. She married the truth. And the truth, for once, kept its promise. Thank you for watching this story from Nightfall Tales. If you enjoyed it, subscribe and return for the next tale, where every secret has a price, every promise is tested, and every heart must choose between comfort and truth.